Secretary for um sorry, I'll do that again. Thank you very much everybody for attending and thank you very much for those who are watching afterwards. As Asia Pacific Secretary, I know how difficult it is to find a time zone that suits, Australia, Europe, and the US. So I know not everybody's been able to join today. And thank you for accommodating this so early. I wanted to just before I talk about the webinar itself, I wanted to give a little bit of background on myself to help really talk about where I'm coming from with regards to this. So this is a photo of me from 2015, back when Aristotle metadata was first launched. Prior to that, I was actually an IASSIST. I've been an IASSIST since 2010. And in 2011, I became the Asia Pacific Secretary. And my experience before, building Aristotle was in official statistics and health informatics with the Australian government, trying to understand, what metadata is and how it's used and what we can do to make it accessible to people. And my official background was, like my early degrees were in computing and statistics to understand, how do we build systems around this. I wanted to give this context because it's a stark contrast to who I am today, and it kind of overshadows my professional background. But who I am today is like I'm a company founder. So we recently just hit 20 employees here in Australia. And we provide metadata software solutions internationally. So we have solutions in Australia, we have solutions over in Europe, and we've got some evaluation platforms over in the United States. And I, as of last year, completed a Master of Business Administration, focusing on, how do we build a business out of this? The reason I think it's relevant to see these two sides of who I am is, to recognize, like, I wanted to give you guys, an understanding of my experience before this, because what I focus on now is building a company out of metadata. And I understand how difficult it is for a lot of people to talk about metadata because it's a very technical and challenging problem that doesn't get enough attention. And I have to sell it on a daily basis. My role is selling to organizations to get them to invest in metadata. And that's where a lot of this background has come from. That's where a lot of what I want to talk to today about is how do we communicate what metadata is and what people have to do to really make a difference. Because if we can't sell the importance of metadata, we're just not going to exist as a company. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that. So we've tried to leverage as much of that experience from a communications perspective to really get people interested. The goal of this presentation is really to get people wanting to come along to our training session that we'll be going to be running in at the conference, at the IASSIST conference in a few weeks' time, to get people engaged in understanding how to communicate this in their own organizations. So it's not about, using any particular tooling. It's really what tools do we use? And the reason for this is I think there's a really big gap in how we talk about what metadata is and what data governance is. We have tools like DAMA's DMBOK, the Data Management Body of Knowledge. We have the DDI lifecycle, and we have principles like FAIR and the five safes that tell people, what they should be doing. Like they tell them you have to have all these processes in place. But we don't tell people how to get started. And we certainly don't do it in a way that practitioners understand or practitioners can kind of pick up early on when there's, no processes in place. One of the things that's most interesting to me working across a lot of organizations is data governance and metadata management are not known in a lot of organizations. They don't have it. They have Word documents, they have some stuff floating around, but generally, a lot of the time, organizations don't have, you know, organizational information around what their data means and how it should be used. So the things that we take for granted, like controlled vocabularies or universes or object classes, depending on, whether or not you use DDI language or the ISO language, these aren't concepts that are well understood. Organizations don't have ontologies. So when we tell them you have to be doing this better, they're stuck in this position of not knowing what to do because there's no starting point. I like to kind of talk about the agile methodology as an example because I think to get some audience interaction, throw a hands up or a react if you've been on an agile project. Because I think most of us have now. Most projects are run using the agile methodology, which means we have sprints and we have 2 week sprints and we have stand-ups and we have retrospectives and we have all of these things that people kind of know how to do that you can pick up and follow, and you're going to do an okay job. You're not going to be an expert project manager, but you're going to do a good enough job that other people can kind of follow along with. And that's what my question is, I guess, again, just to kind of get a little bit of interaction is, prove me wrong. Is there an agile for data management? Is there something that we can tell people to follow that we haven't had before? So I'm not seeing a lot of interaction, but I'm going to keep moving. So if you think I'm wrong, pop it in the chat. So I want to start with an example, and this is an example we've really recently developed, is what we do at work when we see a spilled cup of coffee. Everybody, when we go to work, when you see a spilled cup of coffee in the kitchen, you clean it up. It's part of your job. From a health and safety perspective, it's a slip hazard. Somebody could slip on the cup of coffee and fall over and break their leg, and we know that that's a bad thing to happen. If we see a broken tap at work that's causing a leak, we know that we have to report it. We don't rely on other people to do it. We don't rely on health and safety managers to kind of clean it up for us. And we certainly don't rely on health and safety people running around the building trying to find where all the problems are. We tell everybody safety is a part of your job. Safety is what you have to do. And the reason for that is that health and safety kind of operates like this. Our senior executives say, here are the policies that we have to follow. This is what everybody at the organization is going to do, from cleaning up the cup of coffee to reporting things somewhere. Everybody in the organization, everybody at our university or our employer will put things in an incident registry. We have people who are responsible for reviewing this and providing education to the rest of the organization on how to better improve practices. When we see a bad safety habit, we talk about ways to improve it. And we continue to have this virtue cycle of continuous improvement where things always get a little bit better. Eventually, we have analytics, and that's what gets fed back up to our senior executive, who can review the completeness of this incident register, because it's a really important thing that we have to know about. Health and safety is one of the things that everybody cares about at work, because we all want to go home. We all want to go home as happy and healthy as we were when we came in the morning. So our question is, how do we make this what we want data governance and data documentation to be? So the phrasing that we've put around this is what we call dynamic data governance. And it's the idea that dynamic data governance says our chief data officer really needs to be doing the same thing. We tell all of our employees what their responsibilities are. We get employees reporting some of those changes to a small degree. We have our documentation specialists who review that. They don't do it on behalf of others because they don't know what that data is. We get people who create data to tell us what it means, and they educate people on how to improve their practice over time. So again, we see this cycle of continuous improvement where documentation in the metadata registry improves over time, rather than having to do it all in one lump sum to try and do this big transformation project that big transformation projects never really work. We have our data people who review it, and then they provide that back up to our chief data officer, who can review the registry to go, are we documenting all of our data? Because often a lot of organizations aren't. We don't have the information about all of our data assets, and the quality can vary quite wildly. So we can use this as a tool to, again, continuously review this content. And then as a sideways effect, we wanted to include just a little bit about what our technical systems do, because technical scanning doesn't tell us about the business meaning of metadata or the business meaning of data. A lot of what we think in the IASSIST community metadata is why was this collected? Who can use it? How can it be used? What can it be linked with? What's the meaning behind the variables or the data elements within the collection? How do we build that context so that we know what's available? So we have a scanning capability, but most of the information that's really important for the use of data comes from people telling us what their data means. And this is what we call dynamic data governance. The idea that everybody in the organization has a role and responsibility to talk about data that they're creating on a daily basis. This could be a dashboard, it could be new analytics, it could be an entire data collection or a new study. There's a minimum that they should be putting in so that documentation specialists like ourselves can educate them and continue to work with them to build that quality over time. As one of my employees put it, documentation helps us in future. It's not about helping others. It means that when we try and understand what that is later on, we can do it in a repeatable fashion because we want our data to be reused over time. So I'm going to pause for there and just kind of give everybody a chance to digest, and I guess like we'll open it up to Q&A soon. But I really wanted to talk about how we do that now, and this is what we're going to be talking about at the workshop in Bristol, is what we've done to make that accessible. So I did this training last year. I think IASSIST president, or past IASSIST president, Robin Rice, was able to attend, and I think she enjoyed it. So what we've done is we've built a set of beliefs and a set of behaviors that we want people to understand, and we've built a practice around this to get everybody understanding it. As you look at this slide, you're probably not going to see anything that really differs from what you already do or what you already think. But the purpose of this is, again, from a marketing exercise, how do we get executives, especially senior executives, prioritizing data documentation so that we get the resources we need to actually to do our jobs? And how do we communicate to people, across the organization who may not see this as a priority to do, what we need them to do? So we've split it in like this because what we want on the left is a series of beliefs that we need everybody to understand. We know that metadata is important, or I hope that everybody on this call understands what metadata is and knows why it's important and why it adds value. We need people doing it. A lot of study metadata only comes from people writing it down. It doesn't come from technical systems. It comes from people telling us what they've done and analyzing their own business processes or their own research practices. We want people to understand and try and adopt standards to improve that consistency over time. And then we need everybody to be involved. We want that teamwork approach to make sure that everybody understands their role in that dynamic data governance journey. Is how do we make sure everybody's kind of doing their part? The importance of this is if any of those beliefs aren't followed, if people don't believe those, no behavior and no software is really going to help them, because I think these are all, again, beliefs that we follow. Like, these are beliefs that IASSIST, I think, embodies. That gives us a talking point to really change those behaviors by saying, if we need you to believe this before we look at those actions themselves. When we look at the actions on the right, that ideal wheel, what it looks like is something like this. And we've actually Creative Commons this list, so you don't have to write it down. You can actually download it. And what we've said is at each stage of this process, we want to do a little bit of work to generate what we call small wins. Something I really picked up out of the MBA was the idea that small wins actually build adoption, and they build momentum in organizations. One of the things we talk about in training is that most organizations, and I'd challenge you to think about your own organization, whether it's a university or a government organization or private sector, they don't have a complete inventory of every data asset. And when I say every data asset, it's not just research or business areas, it's also our HR data. Like, it's a really sensitive data asset. And the amount of times I've met with HR and finance areas who say, we don't have data, we just have some systems, is quite surprising. So what we want at the early inventory stage is just four things: a name, a description, a contact point, and a location to start the process off. But we use that as a way to say, this is what we really need to continue people on this journey. From that, we basically build a checklist to build our documentation. Regardless of what standard it's in, we follow an agreed organizational standard to build a really rich data dictionary for every asset, one by one, as we go through the organization. And we do it in a way that uses terms that people are familiar with. One of the challenges that I've seen and am guilty of is when you work with multiple areas, we have this idea of a single definition or a single source of truth. And it really gets people not wanting to be involved in the process. When you say, I'm going to change your definition and your definition to be one single one, we tend to see, organizational friction from that. So we follow this process of endorsement to let people know what's available, And then we have a specific step around auditing to start to harmonize those similar terms across the organization, across the scope of data that we're working with. And we have a leadership phase focused on getting more people adopted and through this cycle so they understand that this is an organizational process. So we have underlying behaviors at each of these stages really to get people through this process, to get them wanting to be involved. So that's really kind of the summary, like the overarching summary of this was really talking to people and saying, this is why I think you should be coming to our workshop at the conference is. So what we've actually done is we've developed this as a way to really communicate to the rest of the organization a set of beliefs and a set of behaviors that we need everybody to be following. If they feel a bit buzzwordy, they probably are because, you know, I'm now in a marketing position running Aristotle, and we need to position this in a way that the rest of the organization understands and can adopt quickly. You know, we use buzzwords and we use jargon and we use frameworks like MAST and IDEAL to give people an idea of what they're doing and how to do it quickly. To give you an example, when we were doing a metadata adoption or a metadata implementation, we worked with an organization and they started to talk about each of these stages as single letters. They said, we're at the I phase. The scope of this project was to do the I and the D phase of the ideal wheel. And what that said to people was it said, we're going to capture an inventory, we're going to do a small number of data dictionaries, and we're not going to focus on the duplication that comes from that because we want people to see the value of it. And that's really what the value of Ideal is it gives us a way to communicate the phases that we're working on, the phases that we're probably all familiar with, in a way that gets the rest of the organization wanting to be involved. It also provides a pragmatic pathway to get people wanting to do more. Again, we need people to treat data governance and data documentation as an ongoing activity as part of their business as usual processes, things that they'll always do forever. Data documentation isn't a project because data is continuously evolving. We want them to understand that they have to be doing this. There's no reason not to be doing this. In fact, it's harming the organization if they're not getting involved and doing that in a way that makes sure everybody across the organization understands what their role is at each of these phases, who does what, so that they understand, and also who doesn't do things, who's not responsible for certain activities, so we don't overwhelm them with too much content. Again, the process here, or the idea is we want to get as many people involved in that journey so that over time we can continue to do that training with them because it's something that they want to do rather than something that they're told they have to do. So that's really an overview. And if you want to learn more, we have a couple of videos on our own site, but I think you've seen the overview. And again, we wanted to keep this simple. MAST and IDEAL are designed to be 2 sheets of paper that we can put in front of executives and business practitioners to get them involved. But we're actually going to be running a half-day workshop at Bristol as well. So there's going to be a half-day workshop, the afternoon of the workshops on the Tuesday, where we'll actually be running through that entire cycle over a 3.5-hour period to really talk through how to get people wanting to be involved in data governance. And we've actually seen a lot of success with this because of how we've marketed it to people. We'll also be giving you the opportunity to get like a little micro-certification. So we have a quiz at the end that you can complete after you've done the training to, put on LinkedIn and share with people to kind of share your expertise. The thing that I like to tell people is you probably, will know a lot of what we talk about. What you haven't seen before is us putting it together in a package that we have. The very first time I presented this, one of the proudest compliments I've received was somebody looked at it and said, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've just never seen it put on a single piece of paper before. And that really resonated with me because again, I think that these are principles that IASSIST follows. We just need to package it in a way that everybody else wants to do it. And it's going to give you a lot of skills to get people wanting to be involved in metadata. Take it from somebody who's moved from data management to sales and executive work. We've refined this message to get people really wanting to be involved in metadata. So you'll be getting a lot of skills to talk about that. And you'll also be gaining access to a community of MAST practitioners. So we're building MAST as something that we're training a lot of the people who use our platform for. but it's designed to be vendor agnostic. And we've had people come along who are not Aristotle users and may never become Aristotle users, and you may never use our tools at all. But the purpose of the training isn't about tools. We actually don't open our laptops at all. It's really about talking about how we talk about data. And then the last thing I wanted to say, that the very top slide, is we've actually been working with Dharma Australia, so the Data Management Association, who wrote the DMBOK, the Data Management Body of Knowledge. We're working on them as getting this part of the Dharma suite of products, because it is a gap. At least, they've recognized it as a gap in helping people understand what they have to do. So we talk a lot through the process about what people will be doing as part of this as well. And if you want to learn more, you can actually just go to mastmethodology.com. I'll put it in the chat, to see some of the Creative Commons material we've released around this. So we're actually releasing a lot of MAST material as Creative Commons, so that other people can use it to better practice in their own organizations. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and thank you, everybody who's dialed in. I hope to see all of you at the training session in Bristol, for those of you who are attending the conference. And if you haven't registered, the link is in the IASSIST membership page as well. So please, hop on and register and come to the workshop, because again, I think you're going to find a lot that you can learn about how we can communicate this into other people that we want to be involved. Because if it's just us, we're not going to make the difference we're looking for. So thank you very much, everybody, for dialing in. I will stay for Q&A, but if you do have any questions, you'll find my contact details through this as well. So please ask any questions you'd like now, or type them in the chat, and I'll start responding to them. But thank you very much for attending and for joining the webinar.
Thank you so much, Sam. I think this is going to be an awesome session, and I bet it's what every research community needs to dip their hands into, getting the insight from you. Once again, I want to say that do not mind the numbers that we have now. It's because of the timing. And
I understand.
yeah, I'm pretty sure we'll be having a lot of our members going to the website, going to our YouTube channel to watch this. Right now, there is no question in the chat room. However, do we have any question?
If there are any questions, just hop off mute and yeah, or pop them in the chat.
Yeah, can pop it up in the chat, or you may unmute and ask your question.
Nope.
Okay.
Hopefully I've explained exactly everything that people needed to know. So yeah, so hopefully I've explained everything that people needed to know. Like I said, if there's no questions, I think that's sometimes a really positive sign. So again, thank you to everybody who's joined. If you do have any questions, I follow the IASSIST lists, and I'm sure somebody will make sure that it crosses my inbox. And the best way to ask questions is to register for the for the workshop in Bristol. So I hope to see everybody there. Oh, sorry, there is one
There's a
question.
question from Anna. Yeah.
Oh, there was one question from Anna. So
Yeah.
very interesting approach. I see some similarities to records management. Was this part of the inspiration? Certainly, yeah. So to that point, Anna, I think I don't have my references list in front of me, but we certainly did look at records management as one of those areas that I think is doing this really well. So again, I've been a member of IASSIST and have worked in libraries in the past, and I think those are areas that are doing this correctly, because of how difficult records management can be, again, especially because of some of the physical records. And I think with data, we don't, I think the challenge with the technology industry is we don't look at what people have done in the past enough. And I think there's some really solid practices from records management and from healthcare management around recording this information to make it easily accessible that was a big part of this. So yeah. Yeah,
I
so
can go on. Yeah.
oh, there's another question. So a question from Diana around business process approaches. Yeah, like that was a big one. So again, the reason why I used the MBA as an introduction was um to provide some context around that. Like I said, I was a data practitioner for a very long time of my career before I started Aristotle. And the reason I did the MBA was to understand how executives talk, because one of the things that I think is important to recognize is that senior executives control, budget. They control resources for our organization. And as well as learning, how to run my own organization, I wanted to know how people in other organizations spoke at that senior level. And that's why I've used a lot of those business processes and things like the business model canvas and other business models as an inspiration for this, because we need to put it down on a page. Like we need to be able to you put it in an acronym and you give it a name and people can kind of adopt it really easily. So the MBA has been a huge inspiration for how I think we need to uh, talk about this to get that adoption in across the organization. Because again, as I said, like the buzzwords and jargon help by saying, we're doing the ideal framework and we're at this phase. It's a shortcut way for us to talk about it and to give people clarity of what we're trying to achieve. So definitely a lot of inspiration from some of those business process models like GSP. Yeah. So yes. And oh, sorry, with the YouTube videos, yes, I'll make sure that we send those out as well. Those are on our own website, on our own linked YouTube channel. So I'll make sure that I send a link to some of that material as well. Cool. Um, any other questions from others in the audience? No. All right. In that case, I'm going to suggest, I know like it's late for myself. So it's actually 7:30 p.m. in Australia. I think it's probably close to 2 a.m. for people in the US. I doubt anybody's joining us. And I know it's very, very early for people from Europe. One last question from Flavian. At the moment, this was going to be in person only, but we do have a lot of that material online, Flavian. Oh my goodness, Diana, it's 4 a.m. Thank you so much for dialing in. Oh my, that is the coolest compliment anybody has ever paid.
Wow.
Um, that is amazing. No, so Flavian, at the moment the workshop's only going to be online. Sorry, only going to be in person at IASSIST, but we are building out more and more of the material. So this is still we've been running this methodology for about 2 years now. We've started doing training externally from about a year and a half ago. And we're building out a lot of that material to support it. So there's material online that you'll find at mastmethodology.com, which will direct you to where you can download a lot of this stuff. And again, I think if you've got a background in metadata, it's really useful. But we are trying to put some more of the exercises out there as well and put some more of that information out there. If you can't attend, feel free to reach out and I can talk it through, because there is some interest in us running an online version or running a YouTube version. So we'll talk to people about how we make that accessible as well. Cool. Um, all right. I think I could be here answering questions all night long. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say I'm going to suggest we take one more from people who are online, and then I will be more than happy to answer questions afterwards. But if there's one more question, I'm happy to take it. Otherwise, again, I really hope to see all of you in Bristol. So who's going to be the lucky last one? Um,
Okay.
no. Okie dokie. All right. In that case, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say farewell. This is my final farewell. A big thank you to everybody who dialed in for this today. A huge thank you to Diana, who dialed in at 4 a.m. in the morning, which is, again, I consider that a very huge compliment. I really hope that it was worth waking up for. But I hope to see you all in Bristol. And again, if you're watching this after the fact, thank you very much for your attention. And I look forward to seeing a whole bunch more MAST practitioners at our workshop in June. Sorry, in June. So thank you very much to everybody for coming.
Thank everyone. And as many that will be at the conference, hope to see you. And we still hope that our members will still watch this. Thanks, Sam, for this. And thanks to everyone for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.